Is Mr. Murray on?
No, so lots probably.
Should I raise him? Let me see if I can raise him.
Is Mr. Gardner? Is Mr. Gardner calling in or coming? Does anybody know? Michelle?
Okay, you're
I
live.
have not heard from him. I assumed he was calling in.
So we have it is 8:02 according to Apple. And I'm going to get the meeting started. The first thing is the approval of the May 15th, 2020 minutes. What's your pleasure?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
I'll second.
Second. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Just a comment. Again, a few months ago, we made the decision to meet on a monthly basis. I know that takes a lot of time out of everybody's schedule. We try to keep these meetings as brief as possible, but I think to help guide the commission and everybody, that this is well worth our time. Obviously, we got some good news this week that we're not going to be without Cedar Point all year, but still, it's not going to be a walk in the park.
Jim,
We're not out of the woods,
Is now
but the woods
joining.
is not collapsing on us. So, okay, new business 2020 budget, which basically somewhat gets thrown out the door as we set it, obviously because of things. But why don't you give us, Michelle, a little bit of update on where we're at financially?
Sure. Thank you, President. So I sent everyone out the financials of where we're at through June 15th.
Right.
And as you can see, we're holding our own at the moment. We're waiting to see what our income tax receipts do through the rest of this year. What we receive in July for income tax receipts is typically a large month. Last year, we're over $1 million typically in July. So far this year, what we collect in June is what we will receive in July, and we've only received just under $300,000 that Rita has collected. So I'm carefully watching that every day to see where our income tax receipts will be in July. But as you guys can see from the email that I sent, our expenses have been down substantially compared to where we were in 2019. Obviously, that's greatly helping our budget at this point. At the end of June last year, we expended $10.5 million, where so far this year, we're only at $9.1 million that we've spent out of the general fund. A big savings there goes to the reductions that we've done for employees. Salaries and wages, we've seen a great savings in those expenditures this year. We're not out of the woods yet. We're hoping that we don't have to do layoffs in the near future, but we are still monitoring this. We're not going to be made whole this year. Our budget, we still know, is our best guesstimate at this point. Obviously, Cedar Point's opening. We've had conversations with them. We'll continue to have conversations with them to see where our our admissions tax receipts will be this year. Lodging tax, we see that, Sports Force is going strong. I know Commissioner Waddington said this morning he saw Kalahari looks to be very busy for opening day today. So we're hoping that we see a lot of tourism come to our area quickly starting next month and even this weekend with Sports Force being open.
And we have to remember with income tax, Michelle, that the government changed all the due dates for like individual returns and that. So there may be a lag there that instead of the big July, because things were due, it could come in October if we get lucky and there's enough people employed.
Absolutely. So, and we're just monitoring that, our net profit returns and individuals, like you just said, they're due July 15th. So we'll begin to see that revenue come in August, but it'll be trickling in after August before we actually see where we're going to land for the year. So there's a lot of different factors playing into the budget. We're doing everything we can at this point. If additional cuts need to be made, we're ready to do that. We've had conversations. We're not going to bury our heads in the sand. So we're staying on top of this. If anybody has, things, ideas, suggestions, areas that we need to look at, please let us know.
Have we tapped the stabilization fund yet?
We have not. Next month in July, we have 3 pays
Right.
in July. That was the month we were going to look at taking one of those pays and putting it into payroll stabilization.
I couldn't remember if it was June or July, and so.
Yep, it's
But
next month.
at least we had the foresight to set up that fund, and when it does hit in July, we're gonna have the ability to pay it without jumping into the general fund, it appears. Is that a correct statement?
That is a correct
I
statement.
know it's part of the
and
general fund, okay, but I mean, it's just additional dollars that we've got tucked away. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and again,
We also have retirements and attrition through those retirements planned yet through the end of this year. We have other people that are exiting, and we're looking at all positions and making sure we're only filling when necessary. So that obviously will help.
if, as you said, the attrition, some of those people are gonna need to be paid out for their vacation time, et cetera, et cetera. Is that
Correct, and
is that something that you could do for maybe the August meeting? Give us kind of a ballpark, and again, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but of the people you know are leaving, an approximate dollar amount. I'm not looking for, down to the last nickel joke, but not down to the last penny, but just some idea that, we have this payroll, and then we possibly have this funds that we're gonna have to expend. So I think that just would be something that would be handy.
Absolutely. I can do that.
And again, I know sometimes you think, why are we meeting? But I think it's just a matter of showing that we support the city, A, and B, we take this seriously. And that, like I said, we're not out of the woods, but I don't think the trees are falling down on us right now.
Absolutely. We'll continue to monitor it every day.
Is there anything that you need from us that can help you? And I know I always ask that question, it's somewhat open-ended, and
Please bring all your family and friends to Cedar Point, and don't let them stay in your house. They need to be put up
Hello,
in a
Mr.
hotel
Murray.
in the city.
but again, thank God we have that stabilization fund, as Mr. Murray and Mr. Waddington and Mr. Stahl remember that the last time in 2008, we had that payment and we had no money and nothing in reserve. So maybe we got criticized for putting some of this money away, but man, does it sure look good now. And I think as soon as things turn around, and when they turn around, we just need to continue to look at that stabilization fund and say, hey, if there's something we can put away in there, we do. Dennis, I don't know if you heard, I'd asked Michelle sometime in, August or September, some time frame there. We've got a few people that are going to be leaving the city, retiring, just to give us some kind of a projection for what else we may have to take out of that fund. We know we're going to take probably have to take the payroll out that happens in July. That's that anomaly payroll that happens, every 7 years or whatever. And so, again, I greatly appreciate everybody's interest in coming to these meetings. I know sometimes they're brief and sometimes there's not a whole lot here, but I want to make sure we're supporting Michelle and the city, and I'm willing to spend the half hour, whatever it is, because, again, we have to get rid of the masks so Mr. Stahl can eat his donut quicker, but other than that,
Donut's done. I do have a quick question for you.
that's why I was just going to open it up for comments. Mr. Stahl, do you have a comment?
We're all enthusiastic that Cedar Point's going to come roaring back.
No, nobody
What?
is saying roaring back. No, I don't think anybody is even, I don't think those words are even on anybody's tongue.
Good, I understand that. But my question is, they're at 25%, is that right, that they can have now?
Mr. Tomasello, can you answer that question without breaking any rules?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what the, at least the initial limit on people is. That sounds, I thought it was between 25 and 30, so I think that is correct.
And how long would you expect that it might be before that gets increased?
That's a very good question, and those are conversations that are going right on now with, you know, we have a couple parks, or one open already in Texas. We have another one coming online Monday. You know, Kings Island down in Cincinnati comes online the 2nd of July. I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on how they do and, you know, what our safety feeling is with, you know, how we feel increasing those limits will affect, you know, not only employees, but the guests. And so I think, you know, we're going to have to, it's going to be a wait and see thing of as we learn from the other parks and, you know, when CP gets open, what we learn from there of can we start increasing that or can't we? But yeah, all those, trust me, we're having all those conversations, you know, as we sit here today. And I had told Michelle, while we probably won't be able to give, you know, here's what Cedar Point's projecting, to help her, you know, forecast out the rest of the year once we get a good forecast for the rest of the year from Cedar Point, which should be in the next couple of weeks.
We appreciate that.
Help. Yeah, because like I told, you know, Dave Hoffman and the rest of the crew, we got to be good partners with you guys, right? And so, you know, we at least, whether it's 10% of what the revenue was last year, or 50%, or 25, whatever percentage, or whatever we can kind of, you know, put guardrails around what we think, just so the cities knows what the next 6 months are going to look like. And so if we have to make, unfortunately, hard decisions, you know, today, you know, as soon as possible, if we have to cut more, what we need to do, or at least have this as a point of knowledge that then Eric and Michelle can go make those hard decisions.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
So I guess this is really a question in sort of three parts, Michelle. The first begins with the premise that Cedar Point isn't going to have the same kind of year that it normally has. And as part of that, we run into some challenging revenue recognition rules, and not something often discussed at public finance meetings, but there are some fairly complex rules. I don't know about the particular rules that would govern this situation, but there's usually a lot of latitude. And one of the things that I have read, I know Steve will be able to speak to this, is that Cedar Point has decided to allow the season passes sold last year to also be good for next year. So I'm a little curious in terms of whether we can get any guidance in terms of how that revenue is going to be recognized. If a guest visits the park this year, just half the revenue get recognized this year, half next year. I think maybe a scant amount of it was recognized in 2019. So that's one question. And I'll just put all three out here together. So it's the revenue recognition question. Then the second one is, Michelle, you provided us with a spreadsheet that was, I might have been misreading it, but my concern was that the withheld payroll taxes were I don't remember where they were. They're about 70% of last year's, maybe a little less even. And I wonder how much of a true read that is in terms of activity that's going on right now, because that would suggest that the income taxes are going to be down. And I should put that number in front of us so we can all look at that, but that was a concern. And then the paper this morning had a number that I thought was really optimistic in terms of what our deficit would be compared to what we've been looking at. So I wonder if we could address all three of those things in turn, please.
Absolutely. Through you, Chairman President, to Commissioner Murray. So the first item, the revenue recognition, Mr. Tomasula and I have had conversations, and that was what he's alluding to. They're still working on their formula on exactly what revenue we will see this year and what will be deferred again till next year because of those passes being good for 2020 and 2021. We've had great conversations. He'll keep us in the loop once those formulas are derived. He won't be able to give us an exact figure of what we expect to look at in admissions tax this year, but probably a percentage or an estimate of what we will be at compared to last year. So as soon as they know something, we'll be in conversation and we'll be able to adjust what we need to as far as lost revenue, I guess, for what we had in the budget versus what we're actually going to receive this year. Now, your comment for June financials, you said something, I'm not sure if I caught all of it, about withholding and payroll tax. Is that what you were speaking of?
It was. There was a spreadsheet that you'd sent to us recently. I'm looking to see if I can put that up on the screen. I think you sent it to us the day before yesterday.
Yes.
And is anyone able to put that up on the screen right now?
Because, and again, our discussion when we first started about income taxes, because the government has changed so many due dates, it's going to be hard to, pinpoint. In other words, July used to be the big payment date for income tax, but when things aren't due until July 15th, there's definitely going to be a spread out there. And I had said to Michelle, we're probably going to see that in the September payment or even the October payment, depending upon people filing extensions. And because again, last year was probably still a good year for a lot of people. So when they're filing their returns, I still think we're going to see the net income tax somewhat the same. It's just it's the payroll withholding that I think is going to be down.
Right, and that's what I was trying to focus on. I do appreciate, because of the delayed deadlines, the extended deadlines, that the revenue will come in later, but it was the withholding that I thought would have been a pretty current indicator of the situation out there.
Okay, Commissioner Murray, I think that was, we were talking about just the withholding tax, income tax, or I'm sorry, individual tax and net profit. Is
Yes.
that what we're speaking of? Okay. So,
I think you had it up on the screen there for a moment.
well, and I had the whole spreadsheet. What I sent to you.
I unfortunately did not bring my iPad this morning.
I may have been misreading it, but it looked to me as though, and I may not be reading it right, but it looked to me as though withholding year to date was about 600,000 versus 900,000 last year. So that, I would think that, so net profits would be something different, but individual withholding taxes, and that looks like it was down, 30, a little bit better than 33%. So I thought that was a kind of stark number.
Sure. Okay, so what I have is withholding tax when we compare 2019 to 2020 through the end of June, and obviously we're not through the whole month of June yet, but last year we collected $3.6 million in withholding tax. Right now we're at 3.478, so we're close to where we were last year for withholding tax. Right now the difference between individual tax 2019 versus 2020. 2019 we were over $900,000 that we collected. Individual tax this year we're looking at $600,000. So we're down substantially in individual income tax returns. Again, that deadline has been extended, so hopefully a lot of that is delayed income.
Our two biggest payers of withholding, if I can interrupt, are obviously Cedar Fair and the hospital. As far as the hospital side goes, we're probably about even with what we did last year. Now, Steve, obviously you've had nobody working over there. So, I mean, your withholding has got to be down substantially. Can you give us some clue as to, of that number that Michelle has given us, Mr. Murray's question, that could be Cedar Fair's? Because obviously your executives took a cut. I mean, a lot of people took cuts and some of the bonuses weren't paid, and we had no employees over there.
You're on mute.
Okay.
It looks like he's muted himself. Steve, you're muted.
Start over.
Well, you just missed a really, really good explanation. Let's try it again. Obviously, no seasonal employees for the most part. We have some significantly down. We'll start hiring them here the next couple of weeks. So at least I don't think we'll probably get back to a peak number as usual, but by July we should be up and running pretty well there. And like you said, the executives who reside in Sandusky who lost, as we publicly said, 25% of their salary. Unfortunately, those are some bigger numbers there. And then the rest of us who also lost 25%. It's a big chunk, right? It's quite a bit of money that we're not paying in income tax until hopefully in 2021 we get back to normal. But it'll be a double digit at least, I think, decrease in what you're going to see coming through for Cedar Fair.
And with that with the number that Mr. Murray asked the question, Michelle, we're down 300,000 if I'm catching. Do you have any clue? And again, I'm not looking for an exact amount or anything to disclose anything. Of that 300,000, was 75% of it probably Cedar Fair because of not having employees? I don't know what you pay on a quarterly basis for income tax. And you may not know that number off. I mean, it's.
I do not. I'm not sure what, Michelle, you see is to get listed vendor by vendor who's paying you.
Mr. Chairman, that was the question was based upon a faulty understanding of mine in terms of what that number was. I now understand and am satisfied that that's just extended. It's going to be down, but those are payments that a relatively small number of individuals make on income that is not withheld into RETA. So it's a little bit of an anomaly, and that's extended. So we won't know that number for a little bit yet. So the last question I had then relates to the number. The article in the newspaper today suggested that income we would only have about half the loss that we thought in the worst case scenario.
I haven't seen the paper today. I know Mr. Oriole contacted me earlier this week and asked for an update on where we thought we would be for our lost revenue projections for what we gave to the paper probably in May or maybe late April. And at this point, we're still kind of in the waiting and see game to see what we have for emissions tax. We don't have that answer yet. Again, lodging tax, how many people are comfortable coming back to the area? Will they be staying in the area? And then again, with the income tax, we're looking at that delayed revenue coming in. So unfortunately, it's a waiting and see game. We don't want to just sit with our hands tied at the moment. We're looking at it, making sure we're cutting expenditures wherever we can. We'll make adjustments, if needed. It's just, unfortunately, it's still too hard to know exactly where we're going to be, and it's going to be a couple months before we can get a real handle on it. Once we see the tourism return to the area, I'm not seeing a lot of businesses remaining closed. People are starting to open back up. I got emails today that some of the banks are starting to opening back up their lobbies. It's just kind of a wait and see game at the moment to see exactly where we can project our revenue will be for 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that.
Mr. Murray, have you had your question? I want to make sure Michelle was done answering.
It's the first question.
Sure. Mr.
Yeah,
Murray.
it was answered. Thank you.
It relates, as relates to Mr. Murray's question, I believe it looked to me from that article that the register simply lifted the numbers off of the graph that the city provided to him early on in this pandemic for a scenario where
Why have
Cedar
to start
Point,
reading the paper in the morning?
Cedar
now?
Point didn't open at all, or Cedar Point opened in July. So they drew the conclusion that they opened in July. So we ought to be able to rely on the graph, the 20% graph instead of the 50% graph. And it's
I would agree with that, Mr.
It's an
Brady.
easy thing for them to do.
Yes. Again, I did not see the paper this morning either, and
Yeah.
Well, if you're in our business, you don't leave home without reading the register.
I'm sorry,
first.
Dennis, what? I couldn't hear you.
I say if you're in our business, you don't leave home without reading the register first.
Now, wait a minute. Time out. If I had my iPad here, I could go on, but they keep kicking me out of the register every time I try to sign on. So there's my bitch for public acknowledgement.
You have to pay for it.
And yes, I paid my subscription.
Yeah, it's still.
You still have to call and sign up.
I know. It's, Mr. Brady, anything additional?
No, I just I reiterate what you started out with, Mr. Nichols, and that is to thank this committee for agreeing to meet as often as you do. Your input is, to me, it's invaluable. We get not just a bird's eye view, but we get the ability to really drill down into these numbers if we choose, and we mostly choose now to do that. And I think Michelle's absolutely right. We will, and Mr. Murray's absolutely right. We will need to continue to monitor this situation almost on a daily basis.
That's why we're meeting on a monthly basis, Mr.
It's
Brady,
not,
and I think that's
getting
going to
Cedar
help.
Point open is avoids a doomsday scenario, but this is, as I said in the paper, this is more than just a bump in the road. We're going to feel the effects of this for a while, but there is light at the end of this tunnel.
The only positive thing I can say is I remember 1998, and that feeling still has not left me.
Yeah.
But this one I have a little better feeling about, because I think there is, I didn't know if there was light at the end of the tunnel in 8 at all. I think, see some positive things moving, you know.
Too. Get 'em.
Mr. Stahl,
No,
Mr. Brady,
I'm good.
Mr. Tomasello, Mr. Murray,
I'm good.
Mr. Waddington. Good. Again, I want to thank everybody, and remind, it'll be July, get the bifocals out here, 17th. And again, things are moving so fast that, you know, on a monthly basis, we appreciate everything that Michelle does and gets out to us. And again, we realize you don't have a crystal ball, so we just take a look at the numbers and see if we can go from there. If there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And thank everybody for attending.
Thanks.